Hello everyone, thank you for tuning in. Again, I am Kaylee Batesman, the Content Director at SheCanCode, and today we are discussing how to supercharge your career. In this episode, we delve into the strategies and insights that can turbocharge your career growth, whether you're just starting out or looking to make a significant leap. Thankfully, I've got the amazing Laura Atkinson, partner at EY, who leads the Alliances and Ecosystem in the UK, and she's with me today to discuss this further. Thank you, Laura, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking the time out. I'm sure you're super busy with your role at EY, so thank you so much for taking the time out. Can we kick off with a bit of background to set the scene today, a little bit about you and how you got into the industry, please?
Of course. So what I will say is that I am in the tech and IT industry by complete accident. Actually, it had no purpose behind it whatsoever.
Here is often.
To be completely honest. So I did my degree at university was international history and politics, right, which is what I loved. I loved history at school, and that was my degree. Believe it or not, the preferred route from my degree was MI6, and I'm not exactly. I mean, that was where MI6 tended to recruit from, and I didn't really want to do that at the time, and the forms you had to fill in were just horrendous. So I thought, well, instead of that, I'm just going to apply to half a dozen graduate schemes, and I did, and I think I applied to British Airways, Kimberly-Clark, and I ended up getting on the graduate scheme with ICL, International Computers Limited, who are now Fujitsu, and I haven't looked back. So, I hadn't set my mind on a career in tech per se, but it was a brilliant graduate scheme. It gave me the opportunity to go and do lots and lots of different things, and I found myself really enjoying it. So that's best part of 30 years later, I'm still here.
Amazing. It's always good to hear stories like that, because there are so many ladies and so many guests that we even have on here that say, you're meant to know everything by university. You're meant to know what you want to do and where you want to go. And actually, you didn't know, until you started looking at graduate programs, which I think the more that we tell those stories, the more ladies in technology will think, you know what, I don't have to have it all sewn up. I don't have to have had the computer science degree. I can still come in. And
I didn't know anything about technology, and I mean nothing. So and you can learn it on the job. And I think that's the other really interesting thing about a career in tech is it doesn't have to be at all technical. There are so many assets to the kind of career that you can have in inverted commas the IT industry, which are very, very non-technical. And in fact, I had a technical job in 30 years.
And did you think that before you joined, or when somebody said to you, or you started looking for jobs in the tech sector, did you immediately think, I'm not technical? And then perhaps when you started looking at the roles, you actually, I don't need to be.
Well, what I knew I did want to do was have a career in sales initially, and so it was sort of sales graduate training programs that I was applying for, all graduate training programs of which I knew there was a sales component, and there was a very good sales component at ICL. So that maybe quite naively actually was sort of the overriding factor in the graduate schemes that I was applying to. But I think once I'd got into the industry, I think I really quickly realized that it would have longevity for me, for a couple of reasons. One, I think because of the multiple different types of roles that you can have in a career in IT, because there's just so many different facets to the industry. And the second being that it just changes all the time. I mean, there is no way you can get bored in this industry, because it by its very nature is massively evolving. And in fact, we're at a point in time now, I think, with how much everyone's talking about AI and Gen AI, etc. It's unbelievably interesting, and it does mean you have to learn a lot, and it does mean you have to keep up with quite a lot if you're going to, sound credible, etc. But that's what's kind of kept me here for 30 years. I think it's working for a couple of companies that I've absolutely loved, and I've been there for a long time, and just the fact that it's always really different.
Yes, yeah, because I wanted to ask you a little bit about what makes the industry so interesting for you to work in, and you summed it up there, the range of roles, and it changes constantly. And I suppose as well that's that misconception of working in technology, that it's going to be technical, you're not going to not much will change. I think a lot of people have that view on the tech industry before they get in. I'm assuming as well, as somebody else that works in the tech industry, I got to travel a lot. The salaries are quite good. Did you know all of those things as well before you came in, or did you think,
I mean,
oh, I didn't know I'd travel this much?
bearing in mind, I did start in the tech industry nearly 30 years ago. So I'm quite old, and you know, the world was very, very different then. I mean, there was no mobile phone. I mean, I got given a pager, right, on my first day at CL. There was no way to do your email on the go. There was no, I mean, but there wasn't such thing as a mobile phone with apps, right? They all had buttons and aerial that you pulled out the top of them. And if you wanted to do some email at night, you had to come home, unplug your phone out of the phone line and plug your Ethernet cable in. So I think the industry was really, really different then. I think it's a lot faster moving now. But I think once you get into a large firm, a large corporate IT firm, and I've been very fortunate to work with big companies, all of a sudden you realize there are sales roles, there are marketing roles, there are operations roles, there are management roles, there are training and education roles, there are alliances roles, which is what I've kind of made my career in, and all of that. None of those things are technical, data, programmers, computer science, etc. I mean, there are plenty of those roles as well, but there are so many different things that you can go and do, all under the kind of the IT umbrella. I don't think I'd really appreciated that when I first started, and I have had the opportunity to travel, which has been fantastic. I think there's actually more opportunity to travel today than there was kind of even 10 or 15 years ago, if you want to do that. But I think the other thing for me as well is, I know, you know, we'll perhaps come on to this, but you know, I'm a working mum for many years. I've been a single mum, and the ability that I have had to really balance my working life and my home life is something that I've really tried to take control of and be really purposeful about, so it kind of fits in with me, you know. And for me, the ability to be the sort of mum I want to be to my children and have really good financial security are the two overwhelming factors for me in all of my job choices. And IT, certainly a tech, you know, kind of tech career has enabled me to do both of those.
Yes, I completely agree. I think more ladies and more mums should know that. I've had quite a few guests on here who are mums or have retrained in tech on their maternity leave, and have all said, you know what, actually, even retraining on maternity leave when their children were young has given them the freedom to be the, as you put it there, the mums that they wanted to be. And even ladies when their children have grown older, just to be able to have that flexibility. I think more and more mums should know that about the tech industry, definitely. In terms of your career, you've had a very successful career. What do you think is the most important factor in supercharging your career?
So I'm actually going to say three things here, which I think are very, very important things. I think the first thing that's very important for your career is self-belief. And I meet so many women, not just in the tech industry, but in multiple industries, just don't have enough self-belief. And they think, oh, what I've got to say might not be as relevant as the other people around the table, and so they don't speak up. And I also meet a lot of women, especially slightly younger females, I think, in industry, that I think often start their contributions in meetings with, I know I'm really new, but, or this might be a silly question, but, and those are two, I always say to them, please stop. Like, just don't say that, yeah, because then all the other people in the room here is, I'm new and it's a silly question. So, you know, that kind of more calm, confidence and self-belief, I think, is really important to give yourself a really good foundation for your career. And I wish I could go back like 25 years and say that to myself. Laura, you did know what you were talking about, so contribute, right? Contribute. So I think self-belief is number one. I think a focus on your personal brand is number two, and that is so, so important. And again, I speak to a lot of women who say, I'm so busy, I haven't got any time to spend on my personal brand and my network and do those other lovely things.
Doing the day of the do, and actually you think
100%, because you're
what other people think of my brand.
You're up to your eyeballs, but you have got to focus on it. And for people listening to this that think, oh, when they say brand, what do they, what does she mean? The way to think about it is this: your personal brand is what people say about you when you are not in the room. Okay, so what do you want people to say about you when you're not in the room? And how you do your job is as important as what you deliver, I think. And I have been quite purposeful about my brand, and trying to create the right kind of brand for me. And my brand is about my personality, about my energy, about how I contribute, as well as what I contribute. So I think, you must take time to think about your brand. It's really important. And then the third thing, the final thing is, I think it is absolutely crucial to be really purposeful about what you want out of your career and from your employer. And I only started doing this in anger about 12, 15 years ago. Before that, I sat there and I thought, well, surely they'll consider me for that job, because I'm sitting here and I work really hard, and they're bound to have noticed that. And I can't believe nobody's asked me, and I've done all these amazing things. And that just wasn't working for me, especially not in tech, right, where it's incredibly busy, where you've got large and complex organizations. You have to be really purposeful about saying to your manager, I love my job, this is what I want to do next, and this is where I want to go. And since I started being really bold and having those conversations with professionalism and humility, right? Not like, oh my God, I'm amazing, just give me the CEO job. But I've done this, I really feel I'm ready for the next step. This is the impact I think I can drive. This is kind of where I want to go. My career has really taken off, right? And I've got the jobs I've asked for. And I've even, during my interview process for that job, then talked about the next job that I want after that. And I think that especially, I do, speak to a lot of females who never ask, right, or think they're bound to be noticed. So I think having that, being really purposeful about what you want with professionalism and humility, and you've got to have a bit of track record in order to kind of, give you some leverage. That is really important.
Yes, I love that. I absolutely agree that so many ladies sit in those roles and think, you know what, but I've done everything my employer is going to ask me. And I think once you realize that as well, that your employer is not a mind reader, and also it's not for them to sort of sit and try and figure out either where you want to go. I mean, employers can help with personal development, and they can try and figure out what you want next. But I completely agree, unless you state what you want to do next and where you would like to go with your career. And I love the fact you mentioned the next job as well afterwards, because we don't always think about that. How is the next job going to lead me to the next one and the next one? Because you're absolutely right. And I think it's okay to mention that in an interview as well, that, you're not going to stay in that job forever, and I need to know where I want to go next.
Completely. I can remember I was having an interview for one job, and the gentleman interviewing said, it's a very standard interview question. Where do you want to be in 5 years' time? And I just said, well, doing your job, right? And he said, and you know what he said? He said, oh, brilliant. I'm just reviewing my slate plan at the moment, so I'll put you down. I was like, okay, amazing. And I think you've got to you've got to kind of edge out of your comfort zone, because it does feel very uncomfortable when you're talking about how good you are, right? That doesn't come naturally to a lot of people, and I often feel dreadfully uncomfortable talking about it, but then I think, well, no one else is going to talk about it, So I have to sort of, convey the things that I think I'm good at and the impact I'm having to the business, the outcomes I'm delivering.
Yes, I agree. And I think as well, ladies find it harder to have sponsors as well in the workplace. So if you haven't got a sponsor in the room that is there when you're not kind of singing your praises and talking about everything that you're doing, if you're finding it hard to find a sponsor that's going to do that on your behalf, then you really need to step up and do that yourself, even if you do feel quite comfortable doing it. Completely
Yeah, absolutely.
And some of that comes into, so I wanted to ask you a little bit about soft skills, and are soft skills important for getting ahead in your career? And I suppose one we just talked about there was just communication and communicating with your team and how you come across. I suppose soft skills are incredibly important, aren't they?
Do you know what? I am so happy that you've asked this question, because I think a lot of females in particular think my skill set is somehow less worthy for senior roles than my male counterparts. Right? I somehow I should feel a bit embarrassed by it, and I'll tell you a short story from many years ago in my career, where I was working with a whole bunch of men, mainly. I think that we were about kind of like less than 10% females. And we were all having to do one of these psychometric tests where it kind of tells you, what your style is, what sort of person you are. And at the end of the test, you got labeled as being a red, green, yellow, or blue person. And you got a stack of bricks that were glued together like giant Lego bricks, which you were then supposed to display proudly on your desk, which would tell everybody what sort of person you were. And blue was very data-driven. I'm a very data-driven individual. Green was about sort of, people. I'm a very people skills person. Yellow was harmony. I like everything to be calm and happy. It's really important that people are happy. And red, the tagline on the red brick was, be bold, be bright, be good, which basically meant come in, impress me, get out again. And everybody in the room wanted the red brick on the top of their bricks, right? And you could see, as they were handing out these columns of bricks, you could see the relief sort of wash over the men, when they got the red brick on the top. My stack of bricks was yellow on the top by a country mile. I just want everyone to be happy. It's really important to me that everybody feels good. And I put my bunch of bricks in my drawer, and I never got them out ever again because I was really embarrassed about it. Fast forward kind of 20, 25 odd years, the last one of these tests that I did, my top 3 skills came back as supportive, caring, and loyal. And my number 4 was decisive. And I'm so proud of that. I was so proud of that. I put that everywhere on myself. We were encouraged to do that. Put your top 3, top 4 skills, in the corners of slides so people know how to talk to you. And we need more supportive and caring people in business. And actually, those skills, those softer skills, make me really good at my job, because my job is to be really supportive with ecosystems and with our alliances partners, and getting them to be really successful, as well as getting EY to be really successful. So, I had a complete turnaround in that perception of importance as these softer skills, which I think people can feel really, not embarrassed about, but they don't feel they're anything worth shouting about. I absolutely refute that. I think, we need more people in business who are really great listeners, have got good EQ, are good at communicating, are really collaborative, that want people to feel really good in their jobs. Very, very important. So you got to celebrate all of that, I think.
Definitely. And even and that diversity of thought and that diversity of styles on a team can be so valuable, I think, as well. Just retaining staff. I mean, imagine if your entire team, or all of your managers at work were all the reds. They all had the red skill. What your day would be like. You wouldn't be able to retain really good talent if everybody there was a red brick. So to have that diversity of different coloured bricks and different coloured skills really is so important. Valuable. Yeah,
really important.
Yeah, and some of that that soft skills also tie in with giving feedback. It's always an awkward topic, giving feedback. I know a lot of people struggle with it, and asking for and acting on feedback is a great way for a continuous improvement. But do you have any advice on how to ask for feedback?
It's a really good question, because again, it's not something that comes naturally to everybody. And I think, you know, my views on this will be, I think it's really important to seek feedback and seek it often. I think don't be afraid of it. I think it's also really important to seek feedback from people who are really different to you. Yes. You know, there are people that I know, I say, well, can you give me some feedback, please? I know what it's going to say, and it will largely be, I hope, good feedback. There are other individuals in my company where if I asked them for feedback, I couldn't guarantee what they were going to say, but actually that's the feedback that's really important, because that's my brand. That's my personal brand for those people, and I want to know what it is, and I want to know any course corrections that I might need to make. So I think if you're working in a company that does have very formal end of year review tools and feedback tools, brilliant. You know, you can pick and request a really broad selection of people to give you feedback. If you're in a company that doesn't have those sort of feedback tools, then I think it's a great idea to send an email out to 3 or 4 people, you know, asking for a little bit of time and just saying, you know, you like to reflect every 6, 9, 12 months, whatever it is, on your performance and on your impact to the firm. I think impact's a really good word to use for that. And, you know, you'd be really grateful if they could spare you some time and share their thoughts, right? And I think that's really important, and I think it's very important to then be able to adapt your style, you know, to multiple different style personas within the business, so that you get the best result. And I think we touched on it a little bit earlier in terms of seeking feedback or getting some coaching. I think getting a good mentor is really important. It's just so important. If you're going to supercharge your career, you must have a good mentor. And, you know, if you're listening and you haven't got one, get one. So tomorrow, because it's so important. And I've had many different mentors in my career for different stages of my career. And at times I've had more than one, because I've needed them for very different things. So I think it's really important to get a mentor. But as well as that, I'd again kind of encourage people listening to think about who is also my advocate, who is my ambassador in the business, because you need both. You need to think about, can I sit here and think of 2 or 3 people whom I know would say in a meeting without me there, oh, you got to talk to Laura about that. I mean, she's amazing, right? And she's done this and this and this, and she's great. And if you can't think of some people that would do that for you, you need to go and try and cultivate that relationship, because they are then giving feedback on you again more broadly, you know, into the organisation. So I think it's really, really important to have both of those people, and, you know, definitely always use the feedback tools that you have to try and get as much as possible. And as I said, don't be afraid of it, and just sit and reflect on it, and then you can discuss your feedback with your mentor or with your coach or whatever, and think about the things you might need to change.
Yeah, and I think some of these things as well, we mentioned earlier, they disappear in the day-to-day, but they're so important. Just going to somebody and asking for feedback can really change the way that you go about your day-to-day, instead of just keep doing the do, and then you get to the end of the year and you think, actually, you know, I haven't reflected on anything that I'm doing, or I haven't found a good mentor to help me with something. And all of that, as you said earlier, that all ties back into your personal brand. And I think sometimes just setting that, even that New Year's resolution of I'm really going to take notice of my personal brand this year, and try and build that into everything that you do, can make such a difference.
Yeah, and I also think, you know, give feedback as well. I think it's really important, and perhaps again, this is, you know, back to my strength, supportive and caring and loyal. I'm often dropping people quick emails saying, brilliant point you made in that meeting, or absolutely love that email, or this is fantastic, you know, massive improvement on before, you know, I'm loving what I'm seeing here. I'm trying to give people that positive, encouraging feedback a lot. And I think if you start to give it, then you will hopefully get some in return as well. So I think it's really, really good to give positive feedback. And I also think one has to be brave and give difficult feedback if it needs giving to people. I've had to do that many, many, many times in my career, and it is difficult, but it's a really good learning experience as to when you have to do that.
Yes, I agree on the difficult feedback. I think we had a chat about that on the podcast recently, and it does depend as well. Feedback changes through the way that the company changes, and we had a conversation on here, for instance, feedback is very different given to a company of 20 to 30 people, and then when you get to 600 people, it's given in a very different way. You might have different mechanisms to give feedback, and especially if it's negative feedback. So I completely agree. It is something that sometimes is very necessary, but it's just learning how to give that feedback is an important part of your career.
It is. And actually, kind of a side note on that is as well, is if you sometimes have to write your own end of year appraisal, and often you have to do that at work. What have you done this year? What do you feel proud of? I think it's really important to look at the language that you're using. And is it a bit apologetic, or are you making enough of what you've done? Are you really showing the impact that you've delivered and the so what of the work that you've done? So you might say, I might say, I've worked really hard and hugely improved the relationship with our alliances this year. Right? Okay, great. So what? Right? So we've increased the size of the business by 76%. Yeah, and so I think often, again, women cannot be as sort of bolshy as they may need to be, in terms of giving their feedback. And I think it's really good to kind of reread that, or get someone else to read your end of year assessments, appraisals, and things like that, just to make sure you're not selling yourself short, right? Your language or with the extent of your achievements.
Yes, you're right. Somebody else might step in and say, hey, did you know actually what you did was amazing, and you've put in one bullet point about what you did this year. So you might just asking for feedback on your own appraisal.
Yeah. And it's the same with your CV, actually. It's the same with your CV. Again, I read so many CVs, and I've helped a few people with their CVs where they sort of sent me a first draft, and I'm like, hang on a minute, you've made your job look really small, and actually it's absolutely massive, and you've got to put loads of numbers and percentages and metrics into that CV so people can see the size and the scale of what you're doing. And even if the size and the scale of what you're doing isn't very big, in percentage terms, it might be really impactful. So I think it's it's good to be on the front foot with your feedback, and your CV around that side of things.
And a lot of that feeds back into soft skills and what we were talking about earlier as well. And some of that leads into those soft skills are very connected to networking. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about, do you have any networking tips? Some people really struggle with networking. It is quite, especially if you're an in-person event, that's quite difficult, just to walk up to somebody and try and make a connection there. Do you have any tips for that, either online or in person?
It is difficult, and again, I do hear a lot from females saying, "Oh, it's quite difficult for us because we don't go to the golf events, and we don't want to go to the bars and everything after work and what have you." And it is hard. I think there's your network, and then there's networking. So I think the only thing that has, not the only thing, one of the many things that has kept me sane in the last 30 years is having a really strong female network around me. And you've got to build that wherever you are. You've got to build, as a woman in business, in tech, you've got to build a really good, small, trusted network of other females around you. It is massively helpful and will save your sanity on repeatedly. So that's very, very important. I think on networking, it doesn't come naturally. to everybody. It is hard, and you kind of just have to take a bit of a deep breath and realize that everybody's networking. And you can choose not to, but it won't be massively helpful for you. You know, you've just got to go introduce yourself to people, you know, ask them some questions about themselves and what they do, and don't be afraid then to say, oh, you know, I'd really love to connect with you, or, you know, would it be okay if I just grabbed your email address and, you know, so I could find out a little bit more about what you do, because they're talking about themselves. And so, you know, whenever I've met you know, interesting people, and they don't necessarily have to be very senior, but you think actually it could be really useful connection for me to have, then, you know, all you've got to do is ask them if they'd be really happy to share a few insights about their career, and blah, blah, blah. You don't necessarily even have to offer them anything in return. And a lot of the time people will be really happy to talk about themselves because they, you know, because they love it. And nor do I think, you know, you should beat yourself up if you're not going to the dinners or you're not going to the bars because you've got to get home for your children. I mean, that's been my life for as many years as I can remember. And so, you know, you don't have to put yourself under pressure to do that, as long as you're doing a little bit every now and again, I think.
It's so important there as well that you split that into your network and networking, because you are right. Some people find networking incredibly awkward. Some that comes naturally, but I think it's where you think that your network has to be huge, and that you
it absolutely doesn't.
Yeah, and you have to connect with everybody, and as you said, just that tribe that you can rely on is far more valuable than just randomly meeting people.
You know, it does. And also, the other thing I would say is take the pressure off yourself a little bit. If you're only 3 or 4 years into your career, you are not going to have a huge network. You haven't been around long enough, you know. And you know, when you've been 30 years into your career like me, you know, I've got a fairly big network. It's only because I'm so old. I've just been at work for a really long time, and so I just know a load of people.
I can confirm, listeners, Laura is not old.
It's a running joke between me and my sort of manager who works for me, who says, oh, it'll be a miracle if we meet someone you don't know, he says, Laura, these days, because I do know quite a lot of people, but that is over 3 decades of work. So you can't fast track it, you can't rush it. You're not going to have hundreds or thousands of connections on LinkedIn, you know, immediately, but it is quality, not quantity, all the time. And so you've got to cultivate what you believe to be your quality relationships.
Yes, definitely. And on that note, are there any quick tips or things that our listeners can do today to get started in supercharging their careers? Networking can take some time, can't it?
Networking can take some time, for sure. So let me give you one little tip that I use often with people that I speak to about their career. And if any of them are listening to this, they'll be, oh gosh, you know, we've heard this before. But I think a really good way to think about how you might need to make a few tweaks or alterations to your career is to draw a little triangle on a page, and there are 3 points to that triangle, and you want to write the initials A, P, and I on each of those 3 points. And A stands for authority. How much authority do you have when you speak, okay, at work? Do you know your subject matter? Do you feel confident in it? Are people going to listen to what you say because you're talking with authority? Okay? The P stands for your presence. What kind of presence do you have? What sort of presence do you have one-to-one, like we're talking now? What presence do you have in a meeting, in person, online? What sort of presence do you have in front of a very large audience, either on stage or as part of a networking event? And, you know, do you need to make any tweaks or anything to your demeanor, to the way you speak, to your delivery, etc., to improve your presence? And then the final one, the I, is the impact. Okay, and you can have impact in one of 2 ways at work. You can either have emotional impact, or you can have intellectual impact. Sometimes you have both. I've got quite good emotional impact. On a good day, my intellectual impact's okay, but I'm genuinely got quite good emotional impact, and I've got quite a good presence, and I hope I've got a bit of authority because I really know my subject matter. And so what I say to people is think about where you might need to tweak each of those little free dials. What's the thing you need to work on? Because you might be sat there thinking, well, I know I'm an absolute subject matter expert, but I don't deliver it with much emotional impact, or I arm wave a lot, but maybe I need to tone that down to be a bit more intellectually impactful. There are things I need to do to tweak my presence. So that is a really quick fire thing, I think, that you can think about as an individual, to think about actually what are the little things I might need to change.
Yes,
Or just adapt, right?
That's a brilliant task for people just to get started on. I think as well, some of those things your mind immediately goes to be, yeah, you have to be a very outgoing personality, you know, and you have to, when you said about presence, you know, I think a lot of people would think, do you have to be the loudest in the meeting, and you know, you have to shove people out of the other way, and you have to be the one with the big personality. But that's not always the way, is it? Everybody has different leadership styles, and all of those three things that you said, actually you can do all of those in your own leadership style, and just tweak them.
Absolutely. And I mean, you know, let's you know, I spent a lot of my career at Microsoft. Let's use Bill Gates as an example of that. Is he really loud? Is he really arm wavy? Does he shout a lot? I mean, he employed a lot of people that did that, you know, which were good counterparts.
Yeah.
But you know, Bill, I was very fortunate to take some customers in to meet Bill Gates when I was at Microsoft. It was a terrifying moment, but he had the most incredible presence. He spoke with utter authority, and he had a huge amount of intellectual impact, right? And a bit of emotional impact, but Bill was very clever, and he employed a lot of people working for him that did have massive emotional impact. You know, he's amazing, right? And he's a quieter leader. So I think if you're sat there thinking, oh gosh, I'm not sure I fit the stereotype, or you might be sat there thinking, oh, maybe I'm a bit too loud.
Yeah, there's that as well.
My authority and my intellectual impact. You know, it takes all sorts of people to you know, to lead and deliver value to businesses. And not everybody wants to lead. Not everybody wants to lead.
Yeah.
And you should put yourself under pressure to do that. So I think, you know, you've got to stay true to your authentic self and be really proud of the skill sets that you have, and find a great vehicle for those skills, because they won't all be the same as everybody else.
Yes, definitely. And I love that, just being authentic to who you are. And you're right, Bill Gates, I remember when he hired Steve Ballmer, you are
Yes.
right, there were people in the company that did wave their arms around, and I remember seeing him at an event, and he was running up and down, and he was sweating, and he was shouting, I love this company. The absolute opposite to Bill Gates, but very clever that he had a team that was very different.
Yeah, I worked for Microsoft for 15 years, and I saw Steve Ballmer running around shouting many, many times. And he was the complete opposite to Bill. But between them, the company got the breadth of two completely different leaders, and there was something for everybody. And that's the other thing, I think, you know, when you think about your career, is think about who you want to work with. And ideally, there should be as little overlap in the Venn diagram of your skill sets as possible, because then you really complement each other. And business gets, you know, a huge range of different skills and ways of working and impact, you know, to deliver the value and the results that you're trying to drive. But yes, it was some very different styles at the leadership table at Microsoft back in the back rewind about 20 years.
Yeah, but that was a really interesting place. We are almost out of time. I've got one last question I wanted to ask you. Is there anything you wish you'd known before starting your career?
I think that comes back to a couple of things that I've already mentioned. Actually, I wish I'd had a bit more self-belief. You know, I wish I'd been more purposeful earlier in my career, and taken control a bit more of my own destiny. I kind of let the first 15 years of my career happen to me, you know, as opposed to being, you know, trying to kind of steer it. I was kind of taken along in the car. Super happy, by the way, really happy. I've been very fortunate. I've worked in some amazing companies with some fantastic people, but I kind of let it happen rather than taking stock and thinking about, actually, what do I really want, and what value can I really bring, and how do I go out and articulate that and be really purposeful.
Yes, there must be so many listeners as well who are thinking, I can relate to that. How many of us just kind of get in that, not a trap, as you said, people are very happy in their careers, but perhaps they're not thinking about the next job or the next one, and they're not speaking up about what they would like to do. I think there is so many people that feel that way.
I do, and you know, you don't always have to have a plan. You don't have to put yourself under pressure to have a 2-year, 5-year, 10-year plan. I'm not sure I've ever had that, but I think you've just got to think about, actually, where do I want to be that's going to allow me to do my best work. I can be my authentic self, and I can use my skill sets really well, benefit the business that I'm working for. And I think if you take a really good look at that, your career path, or certainly maybe the next job or the next +1 job, will become fairly obvious for you. And then you know, go out and ask for it.
Yeah,
I think go out and ask for it.
Go out and ask for it is lovely advice to end it on. A really, really positive note there. Thank you so much, Laura, for taking the time to have a chat. Been absolute pleasure. I could talk to you for another hour or so, but we are already out of time. So thank you. And to everybody listening, as always, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again next time.